Hey everyone, it's Mr. Hart. This is a lecture called The Sound of the Id. We're studying the sound of language for Unit 2. So once again, to remind you, we're traveling in this unit from the smallest components of language, which is just neuron firing and thoughts and feelings, and ethos, pathos, logos, Freud, how those rattle around in your head, and then how once you determine that you're going to speak, does it then travel into your mouth and turn into sound, and then eventually we'll get into how the sounds form to words to sentences to paragraphs. Okay, so the sound of the id. We're now working with the way that things are formulated into sound. All right, a lot of the information from the first part of this lecture comes from a source that I think I would be made fun of quite a lot by scientists, linguists, and college professors. But I have a rationale for why I'm going to use him as a source anyway. You see, in science, instead of MLA in the humanities, you're going to be using APA. And in APA, you have to have sources that are very recent. They really care about the most cutting-edge resources. And linguists are in the sciences, and they're gonna demand the research that links up with MRIs and different modern conceptions of the mind. And I'm going to be going back to the 1800s to use a guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he wrote an essay called "On the Origins of Human Language," or on the origins of language. And the reason I'm using him as a source is because he, like so few linguists, at least that I'm familiar with, he has his finger on the pulse of the humanities, about the soul, the spirit, the feeling, the emotion, and the communication for, I suppose, catharsis and art. I think he has his finger on the pulse of that really beautifully, and so I like to use him as a source. And some of these, I think that in spirit he is very, very, very accurate, especially in my field, which is in English. But for cutting-edge research, you have to look elsewhere. So Rousseau has a theory that has not been disproven yet, by the way. It's still being mulled over. The theory is that all words, every single word that I'm using right now, every single noun that's in my field of view, desk, chair, door, or if I'm outside, cloud, tree, river, stream, that if you trace those words back etymologically, so etymology is the study of the history of word origins, that if you go back far enough into our past, those words were onomatopoeias. We talked about how, I think we talked in class about how the word bop used to be the onomatopoeia for throwing a stone in water. And over time, it's very likely that this then changed to bop, and then bopped, and then baptismo, and that's where we get where the West gets its conception, or Protestants in the West get their conception of baptism being immersion. So if you trace the word baptism back to its original roots, you get an onomatopoeia, which is something being immersed fully, or bop, or baptismo into water. Bop is sort of like splash, and baptismo sort of like kerplunk. So it sort of became more and more of aggressive onomatopoeia as time went on. And now we've lost a lot of the root origins of these, like the word door. Like, at what point was door a flap on a tent, and what noise did that make? And then are we saying that when a tent flapped, it was door? No, it gets lost over time. The roots are gone. We don't know where they came from. But the leading theory is that they started with onomatopoeias, and when language was really simple. So this aligns and meshes well with our conception of evolution, that when we were in a much less advanced form, and all we could really say was like, whoa, right? Like, whoa, that sort of noise became something else, and then morphed over time to like, holy crap, or whatever, okay? So when things were simple and we were more animalistic, we just sort of barked out emotions, essentially. That's where language came from. Now, I think we can take that, let's assume that that jives for right now. Like I said, it has not been disproven. It's very compelling. Then that means that tracing onomatopoeias back further, onomatopoeias are a conglomeration of sounds. Like splash is the combination of the words sp or the phonemes, I think they're called, splash. Those words, those sounds, have come together, lumped together into our word splash. And that's actually very complicated for our mouth to do. That's why babies can't talk for forever. It takes forever to learn how to do all those muscle movements. Close the mouth. All that takes a lot of practice to do. So if you trace onomatopoeias back even further, these were just guttural sounds, the sounds that birds make, that dogs make. Chirp, whatever. And that's where we're going to start, is sounds, and how, why is it that when we have a certain thought or feeling, do we pair it with a specific sound? So let's talk about what the sound of words are. And why is it that we tend to pair light, airy, vowel-heavy sounds with pleasant, loving, literally liked, or compassionate feelings? Why is it that we pair harsh, cacophonous, consonant-heavy, plosive, which are the sort of percussion sort of sound? Why is it that we pair those noises with strong, heavy, aggressive, forceful concepts? Now, this is an oversimplification. What I'm about to do. I'm going to give you two examples. But feather versus stone. Feather, that's a little harsh, but like my mouth sort of opens in a very French way around that word. And feather is a light, airy, wistful concept. And stone is a much harsher, more dangerous, more stoic, I suppose, conception of or idea. And over time, we have sort of paired sounds and emotions in that way. And what you find is that vestiges of this still last today. Now, if you don't, be careful, when you listen, be careful, because I'm about to say something potentially controversial. In 2017, we are tinkering with the foundations of gender, and we are reevaluating how it is that we conceive of something as being masculine or feminine. And this is not a debate about that, but we are going to be talking about how traditionally, by traditional we mean like 1960 and literally back for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The traditional conception was that masculine thoughts were the harsher, more aggressive, more stoic, more firm concepts. And that the feminine ideas were much more light, airy, compassionate, loving, nurturing, motherly. Like I said, these right now we call these stereotypes, and essentially they are. But that was the conception of the gender roles when words were evolving over time. So let's talk about some feminine traditional names like Heather, Mary, Maria. I'm just thinking of these off the top of my head. These are very vowel-heavy, light sounds. Your mouth opens and air pushes through. And then remember, cacophonous, consonant-heavy, plosive sounds. Mark, Kevin, Kyle, Paul. These sounds are more traditionally masculine. So you can see that sounds do change based upon the what you'd like to communicate, and so it is intriguing. It's intriguing to think of how we can pair certain sounds with certain emotions, and they travel better together. Back in the traditional time frame, if you're a music fan, you know about opera. And opera was traditionally done in Italian and French, because those were Italian and operas were traditionally love stories. And it was a very loving, airy, pleasant, melodic sound to have French and Italian language chosen. It took Mozart, really, this is a silly example, but like the Michael Jordan of composers, to even attempt to do an opera in German. And it's very successful. It's the Magic Flute, or Die Zauberflöte. But just even listen to that sound, Die Zauberflöte. German is a very harsh, cacophonous language, and so it pairs well with certain types of emotions. That's for certain. So I'd like to talk about something potentially pretty offensive, and I apologize, but I think it just really does an efficient job of describing the evolution of language and sound. Okay? Now, if you were to think of all of the most offensive words you can possibly say, the ones that would get you kicked out of class in a split second, referral, no doubt about it. All of those are very harsh, cacophonous. Let me define cacophonous. Cacophonous is the opposite of euphonous or euphony. Euphony is pleasant sounding, and cacophony or cacophonous is harsh sounding. So over time, we've paired all of when we want to be harsh, aggressive, to offend, and to really almost physically make people wince. We choose plosives, cacophonous words, consonant heavy language. I won't say those words out loud, but use your imagination. If you were to get up close to someone's face and yell swear words, the plosives and the cacophony actually can make people wince. It hits your eardrum like a drum, and it can actually make you wince, because if you're trying to offend someone, you do internalize this. You know this. You instinctually know. If I'm trying to offend you, let me choose very offensive, harsh sounds and lob them at you with velocity. The words that are swears, but that you can say on television, at 6 o'clock at night on CBS, those swears there's one notable exception, but those swears tend to be in the mid-range of between cacophony and euphony. One more example with swears is that over time, over hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years, there are words that pop up that are not phonetically matched. Please remember that term, phonetically matched. Phonetics, phonics, sound matched, phonetically matched. Over time, sometimes there are words that pop up that are not phonetically matched well. It's a word that means something offensive, but doesn't sound offensive. Those words become extinct over time. One example is it would have been very offensive in Shakespeare's time, in the 17th century and 16th century, to call someone a saucy boy. That was very, very offensive. But saucy boy is not supremely phonetically matched very well. It's highly offensive, but it's in the mid-range between cacophony and euphony. So saucy boy is no longer said because it's been replaced by a much more phonetically matched word, and that word is bastard. That word also has the same connotations, or very similar connotations, and that word has, if you were to say it, has a much more harsh, guttural, cacophonous, plosive sound. So that word is phonetically matched. We use that B word now, and saucy boy, most people haven't even heard of anymore. So that's sort of how language changes over time in etymology, and how sound helps us communicate those. Okay, I want to read to you two poems. One's a love poem, and the other is a free verse beat poem about destroyed lives. And I want you to listen to how these are phonetically matched. Okay? And this poem is about extremely bright, and this is a very, very, very famous poem by Allen Ginsberg called Howl. And it's about a generation and a time when the best and brightest minds felt disenfranchised, which means they felt hopeless. So if you were smart, you didn't go off to college and get a high-paying job. So you sort of just stagnated and didn't do anything. And this poem is a response to very almost genius-level people whose lives are unraveling because they had no potential. They saw no potential in their lives. So this is about bright people in terrible situations. And so when I read this to you, I want you to listen to how it is very cacophonous, harsh sounding. It's consonant heavy as opposed to vowel heavy. It's got fricatives and plosives and harsh sounds, and how that pairs up well. Okay? It's very short. Here it is. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the dark streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high sat up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats, floating across the tops of cities contemplating jazz. Floating across the tops of cities contemplating jazz, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high. Hipsters, burning, hysterical, naked. These are harsh sounds. Now, let's pair this with an E.E. Cummings poem. And this is a love poem. And I want you to hear how this is much more airy, which means my mouth is going to open more. Air is going to be more fluid. It's going to be more light sounding, vowel heavy. I think I forgot to mention that. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere you go, I go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the bud of the bud, of the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than the soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. I counted about maybe 6 hard C's with carry, because that's part of the title. And it has the word keeping in it. But there are long stretches of very open-mouth, vowel-heavy things. Whatever is done by only you is my doing, my darling. Do you hear there's no plosives? Right? Whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. So those poems are an indication of a phonetic match, and poets are very, very aware of this. Okay. The last thing that I'll mention is this. If you watched the previous lecture about advanced ethos, pathos, and logos, then you've seen this before. This is a two-dimensional diagram of how logos, ethos, and pathos can be blended together into creating more nuanced arguments. But what I didn't tell you about last time was that there's a black circle in between. So this is the area where an argument can reach all 3 appeal types at the same time. And then there's a black circle here, which represents how words can be made phonetically pleasing. So if someone hits the bullseye right here, what this is an indication of is that the appeal that they're giving someone is ethos, pathos, logos at the same time, and it's phonetically matched and phonetically matched. So this is the best of all possible worlds. If you're an ethos style thinker, it's got something for you, and it's pleasingly sounding ethos. If you're a pathos style thinker, this statement will be pathologically very resonant with you. And then if you're a logo, same thing. And yesterday I touched on, how do I turn this thing? Yesterday I touched on this particular quote. I want you to think about how each of the types is present there, and it is phonetically matched. It's poetic sounding. So here it is. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So that is a phonetically pleasing, poetically intriguing statement that has all three of the appeal types in it. And that's a beautiful example of Martin Luther King and what made him so profoundly influential in the 20th century. That circle is sometimes called, that black circle, or creating a poetic, phonetically matched sound, is sometimes called logopoeia. So it's sort of like onomatopoeia, but logopoeia is a indication that something has been pleasingly written with poetic language, whether it's metaphorical or beautiful or musical sounding, and the sound matches the tone. All right.